All right, so welcome to our second meeting of New York Apologetics Long Island chapter. So I am Tim, as he said before. So we are in the 10 questions series. So the whole point of this series is that we're going to answer 10 of the biggest questions that people have regarding Christianity. So we're going to take one question a month, and we're going to go through our list of 10 questions. So in case you weren't here last month or you simply forgot, so these are the 10 questions that we are going to tackle. So tonight we're going to be looking at number 1, why believe God exists? Next month, did Jesus really rise from the dead? Number 3, that's a big one. If God exists, if God is all good, all powerful, all knowing, why is there evil in the world? Number 4, does science disprove religion? Number 5, why should we trust the Bible? Number 6, does the Bible condone slavery? Number 7, is it intolerant to think Jesus is the only way? Number 8, how can a loving God send anyone to hell? Number 9, is Jesus a ripoff of pagan gods? Okay, that's a popular one on the internet, so if you haven't seen it, good for you. But yeah, it's big on the internet. And then number 10, are miracles possible? Okay, are miracles possible? So of course, the first one that we're going to start with is why believe God exists? If we don't have any good reasons to believe God exists, then what do the other 9 questions even matter? Okay, so this really is the most important one. Why believe God exists? So I want to throw this to you first. All right, why do you believe God exists? And if you've been, attending our apologetics classes for a while, maybe, you could hold off and let other people answer first. But really, why do you think God exists? Why are you here? Why should we believe that there is a God? Or at least, why do you believe there's a God? Okay. Anybody else? Why do we think God exists? Is it just something that you take for granted? Do you have reasons to think that God exists? If someone were to come to you and ask you this, how would you answer? Or even if you're not comfortable, sharing an answer now, start thinking about it. All right? It should be something that we're thinking about. Hopefully you could start formulating some answers. Let me back up. Okay? Look at these questions. Start thinking them over yourself. How would I answer this? What would I do? Because, let's face it, we're going through one a month. Okay? It's going to be a while until we get to 9 and 10. Okay? So who knows if you might confront this on your own at some point with somebody that you're communicating with on the internet. So, try to get started in your own mind. Why do I think this? Why do I believe this? How would I respond to this? Okay? Anybody else? Why do you believe that God exists?
Mm-hmm. I don't like it. I went through Catholic my whole life. Thank God I'm out of that and I'm born again. But you just know about God if you've heard about Him. But then when you think about all of those wonderful things that were created, all of it couldn't have just happened like that, but God.
Right.
And that's, every time I look at the beauty in nature or the beauty in behavior, something, that's God.
Right.
You can't deny Him if you know anything about Him.
Okay. Anybody else?
Because of the things I've been through, I know I couldn't get through without God.
Okay. Okay. Right, sure. Just looking out at the universe, like, come on, how could there not be a God? Or something experiential, going through hard times and just having that peace and that assurance as we go through those hard times. So tonight we're going to look at 2 strong reasons to believe that God does in fact exist. 2 powerful arguments. Okay? So they're known as the Kalam cosmological argument and then the moral argument. So what we're going to do tonight, we're going to look at 2 big arguments. One, looking at the entire universe, cosmology, okay? One argument from the universe, the existence of the universe itself, and then we're going to zoom all the way in to the human heart. So really, that was a pretty good segue. You guys were, it's like you guys knew what I was going to talk about. So we're going to have 2 strong, there are other arguments, okay? There are other arguments I could talk about, but I wanted to give you these 2. I think, personally, I think these 2 are the most powerful. Other people have, ones that they prefer, but I think these are the 2 strongest arguments for the existence of God. So we're going to begin by looking at the Kalam cosmological argument. So just looking at the universe itself, how the universe, the existence of the universe is evidence for the existence of God. So This is the argument, which is known as the Kalam cosmological argument. So this is a logical argument, okay? So there are two premises and a conclusion. So this is how logical arguments work. Now, when you're having a conversation with somebody, you might not be, okay, well, look, I believe in God because step one. Then step two, you might not do that. You might be more conversational. But it's always good to kind of formulate your thoughts, to lay them out logically, step by step. So this is a logical syllogism. So as long as it's sound, and as long as it's not like, roses are red, violets are blue, God exists. As long as it's sound and the conclusion follows from the premises, then, well, the conclusion then must be true. So long as the first two premises are more reasonably true than false, okay? So as long as they're more reasonably true, then they're opposites. So when you're thinking about this, when you're wrestling with it, when you're sharing it with someone else, you know exactly what you're defending, and likewise, you know what you're defending against. You know what you're going to have to support, and it gives the people you're talking to, all right, hey, look, man, you want to go against this? You want to go against God's existence? Which one you want to deny? Okay? So it's just good to have a logical flow, to your arguments. Okay? So one thing I want us to notice, though, God isn't in this. The whole purpose of tonight is to talk about, well, why should I believe that God exists? Okay? Well, once I'm through showing you the three steps, then I'm going to argue that the cause is God. Okay? So that cause, the best explanation is going to be God. Okay? So let's start by looking at premise one, statement one. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Okay? This is a very simple argument. Okay, I didn't even read through it, so let me read through it now. So step one is whatever begins to exist has a cause. Step two, statement two, the universe began to exist, and then the conclusion, therefore, the universe has a cause. Very simple. Very simple. There's nothing complicated in here, no fancy vocabulary, very straightforward, yet it's a very powerful argument. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to take this step by step. Okay, we're going to look at it one step at a time, and then give some evidence to support each step, okay? Once again, we don't need to give this ironclad argument, okay? It just has to be more reasonably true than false, okay? Some people, they're going to want absolute certainty. It just needs to be more reasonably true than its negation, than false. So let's look at the first one. Whatever begins to exist has a cause, okay? So this has to be more reasonably true than saying that, no, things can come into existence on cause, without a cause. Okay? So we want to know, well, why should we believe this is true? Well, I think this is common sense. It's something that we just intuitively know. Things don't just come into existence for no reason. Things don't just happen. We understand the principles of cause and effect. Effects don't just happen on their own. Okay? Or to put this more simply, something can't come from nothing. Okay? Whatever begins to exist has a cause. If something does not exist, there's got to be something to bring it into existence. Okay? Like, this church didn't just appear here. Somebody had to build it. Somebody had to plan it, get the construction materials, and they had to actually build it. Things don't just pop into existence. Now, when we're saying something can't come from nothing, there's a lot of skeptics who want to play word games on this word nothing. They'll be like, oh, well, before this universe began as it is, there was just like this giant vat of nothing, and then something happened, and like they want to talk about nothing as if it's something, okay? Or it's just a quantum vacuum. It's a fluctuating of particles. So sometimes skeptics will talk about nothing like it's, nothing much or nothing significant, okay? But when we're talking about nothing, I mean literally no thing, okay? That's what it literally means. Nothing means no thing. So, before the universe came into existence, we're saying that there was no space, no time, no matter, no energy, literally nothing. Okay? So, this is what we're arguing. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. So, again, it relies on the principle of cause and effect. It's something that we know all the time. Think about science, okay? Science would not work if it were not for cause and effect. Okay, you know that, you turn up the heat on the tea kettle, it gets to a certain temperature, and it boils. It doesn't just happen. Water does not just miraculously boil on its own, okay? Or it doesn't simply freeze, okay? It has to be brought down to freezing point. So if we reject the principle of cause and effect, then you may as well just reject all of science also, okay? Because that's simply how it works. Think about it. If you're home and you hear a knock on the door, your instinct is to say, who is it? Okay, you're not going to think that it was just some noise that simply happened. Or maybe you're going to think that, like, if there was a storm outside, maybe the wind blew a tree branch against your door, but you're not just going to think, well, it simply happened, a noise just simply happened. It's common sense, it's basic, and it's intuitive. If I'm home, okay, and I'm on the other room doing something, and I hear a crash from the room where my kids are, I know that they broke something. Now I'm going to go in there, I'm going to say, what happened? And they're going to say, nothing. No, you did something, okay? Like, toys don't just fall off the shelf, okay? We know this. We understand this. It's common sense and it's basic. If you want to reject it, then you're going to have to reject a whole lot more. Now, let's say that this first premise is not true. Because remember, we want each of these statements to be more reasonably true than false. You don't have to prove within, any kind of doubt within 100%. Just has to be more reasonably true than false. So, if it's false, if things can pop into existence uncaused from nothing, for no reason at all, why doesn't it happen more often? Why don't we observe it? Why don't we see it? Okay? All the time. Like, why doesn't a car just pop into my driveway? Why doesn't money just fall from the sky? It may sound silly, but it's true. Why don't we see it happening? Why doesn't it happen more often? Or if it can happen to the universe, what's so special about universes popping into existence? Why doesn't it happen again? Why are there more planets just spontaneously forming? You need to ask those kind of questions. Okay, well, if it can happen, why don't we see it more often? What is more reasonable? To think that things can come from nothing or that they cannot come from nothing uncaused? So William Lane Craig, one of my favorite apologists, so he says that a universe coming into existence uncaused for no reason is worse than magic. Because at least when a magician pulls a rabbit out of a hat, you at least start with the magician and the hat. Okay? So believing that a universe pops into existence uncaused for no reason is actually worse than magic. So any atheist, any skeptic who believes that, actually they believe worse than magic. What they believe is worse than what we believe. Okay? That something like that can actually happen. So I think it's pretty obvious that whatever begins to exist does in fact have a cause. Any questions so far? Water break. All right, so now we need to move on to the next one. The universe began to exist. Is this more reasonably true than false? Is it more reasonable to believe that the universe did in fact begin to exist? The alternative is that the universe has been here forever. That's the alternative. So it has to be more reasonably true that the universe began to exist than it has been around forever. So we're going to look at two pieces of evidence here. Well, actually two different branches of evidence, I should say. So we're going to look at some scientific evidence, and then we're going to look at some logical evidence. Okay? So I want to start off by looking at the scientific evidence. Okay? So in the 1920s, so there are two mathematicians, Alexander Friedman and George Lemaitre. I hope I pronounced the names correctly. So they formulated these equations. They took these equations by Albert Einstein. Hopefully we've all heard of Albert Einstein. So they took some of his equations, some of his work, and they created a model on their own, mathematical model, showing that the universe is in fact expanding. Okay? But now how science works, you first start out with your mathematical model, you start off with your theories, but then you need to actually show it and prove it in practice. So in 1929, Edward Hubble, the astronomer, you may have heard of, Hubble telescope and whatnot. So he was able to notice the fact through his telescope that galaxies, at a distance, the light coming from these galaxies were coming back redder than what would be expected. Okay, so this is an effect in science that that objects moving away from you. It's not something that you might be able to see with the naked eye, but objects moving away from you tend to shift a little bit redder in their light because of the way that the wavelengths are going. They're going farther away, so the light is going farther. Objects coming closer to you are going to shift a little bit bluer. Okay, he noticed that these galaxies, the light from these galaxies were coming up redder than should be expected. So this is a red shift. No matter what part of the sky he looked at, he noticed that there was a red shift, showing that all of the galaxies, the universe, is actually expanding. All these other bodies are moving away from us. Okay? Now you might be like, well, I don't feel like I'm expanding. I don't see anything expanding. Well, it's because everything in the universe is expanding. So, if everything is expanding at the same rate as you are, you're not going to notice it. Okay? So this is, the Big Bang model. This is where the idea of the Big Bang came from. So scientists, they say 13.77 billion years ago. I'm not going to argue that number. We're not getting into that. Okay, age of the Earth, not going there. This is just what scientists say. Okay, 13.77 billion years ago, bang, the universe came into existence. Okay, because if you take this expansion and you use the same laws of physics, but you go backwards, everything's going to collapse into itself until it forms what people call the singularity, a single point where there's no space, no time, no nothing. Okay, no nothing. It is nothing. There we go with slang. Okay, so as we go back in time, it's going to collapse, and before that singularity, before that point, there is literally nothing, absolutely nothing. Okay. But, of course, we need to make sure that we can continue to confirm this. This happened in 1965. Scientists accidentally discovered what's known as cosmic microwave background radiation. Basically, this is the after image of the Big Bang that we can still detect today. That's how big of a bang it is. That we can still detect its after effects. Once again, confirming that there was some kind of Big Bang, or the universe did come, boom, into existence some number of years ago. I mean, over and over again, math and science is confirming that the Big Bang model of cosmology is legit, is true, is the actual one. Mathematicians, scientists, people have tried to bring up alternative models, oscillating theory, that the universe, expands and collapses, steady state models, all different kind of models. But the one that is the most tried and true, the most consistent, the most widely accepted is the Big Bang model of cosmology, which is just scientific evidence that the universe did, in fact, come into existence. So we're going to look at any questions? Any questions before I move on? So, excuse me? Okay, that's a good one. Yes. All right. Otherwise, it's going to have to bang something, wake everybody up. All right, so our second scientific bit of evidence is what's known as the second law of thermodynamics. So this deals with the transference of heat and of energy. Basically says that heat is going to move from some kind of a hot object to a cold object, but not the other way around. So, if when the heaters come on, okay, the heat's going to come out of the vents, and eventually all the heat's going to spread out throughout the room, okay? Of course, it might rise some, but generally it's going to spread out throughout the room. It's not going to go back. That's what the second law of thermodynamics says. It's not suddenly going to just go to one corner or just stick to the floor or something. That the universe is increasing in what's known as entropy. Okay, it's becoming more chaotic, more disorderly. Also, it means that the universe is running out of usable energy. So you think about what energy is, you have to kind of consolidate energy. You have to have it together so that you can then use it. You consolidate energy in a battery. You put gas, you consolidate it in your car, the fuel tank, so that you can use it. Energy has to be consolidated. But what the second law of thermodynamics says, that the universe is running out of usable energy. Okay? Things are kind of spreading out. The energy is being spread out. As we perform actions, little bits of energy are being lost. So one of the implications of the second law of thermodynamics is that we're heading towards what scientists call a heat death, our universe. Okay, it's heading toward a heat death, meaning that's going to be just cold and lifeless. There will be no change possible. There will be no usable energy in the universe. So just to give an example of this, so imagine, cold winter day, you don't have remote start. So you go out, you start your car by key, because I know that remote start, will shut off after 10 minutes. But suppose you go out to your car and you start it by hand, you go inside, and then you find out, school's canceled, or, your boss closed down work. Great, but you forget to go out and turn your car off. Well, if it's sitting in your driveway, running and running and running and running, eventually just sitting there idling, it's still going to eventually run out of energy. Okay, it run out of gas, I should say. It's going to happen. Okay, even if you're not using it and it's just running it idle, it's going to run out of gas eventually. Now imagine the car was the size of the universe. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether it's going to be 1 year, 2 years, a million years, a billion years to run out of gas. Eventually, that universe-sized car will eventually run out of gas. Does that make sense? So now let's think about the universe. Okay? If the universe has been here forever, we know that the universe is running out of usable energy. Eventually, eventually it's all going to run out. You have to ask the question, how come it hasn't already run out of energy? If we know that it's running out of usable energy, if the universe has been around forever, it would have already run out of energy. In fact, it would have run out of energy an infinite number of time ago. Okay? But that's just another reason to think that the universe has not been around forever, that it had to have had a starting point. So no matter how long it takes for the universe to run out of energy, could be, 100 bajillion years, but guess what? 100 bajillion years will get swallowed up into eternity, infinity, okay? So if the universe has been around forever, it would have already run out of energy. Since the universe has not run out of energy yet, it just follows that the universe has not been around forever, that it must have had some beginning. Does that make sense? Any questions about the second law and how it works? All right, so I gave us two scientific reasons to believe that the universe actually did begin, that it's not infinite to the past. Now, as we've all been hearing for the last year, okay, the politicians and all the celebrities have all been telling us we need to follow the science. So, as I'm telling you tonight, you better make sure that you follow the science. The universe, the best science tells us that the universe did in fact begin to exist. I like to have fun, all right? I know this stuff could be boring. I like to have fun. All right. So we looked at two scientific reasons to believe that the universe did in fact come into existence, okay? So now we want to look at a logical reason, okay? A logical reason, just something you could think about, okay? Performing a thought experiment without even having to go out and perform any kind of scientific experiments, something that you could just figure out in your mind, like, yeah, the universe can't possibly have been here forever. It had to have had a beginning. So let's think about this. Can you count to infinity? Is it possible to count to infinity? No, it's simply impossible. That's what infinity means. It just means that numbers go on forever. You can never actually reach it. I know as a kid, kids are always like, I can count to infinity. They sit there, they count, and they're just like 998, 999, infinity. You got to cheat. You have to cheat to get there. Okay, you have to cheat to get there. Okay? So the same way that you cannot count to infinity, from 0 to positive infinity, it's also impossible to go from 0 to negative infinity, okay? So why is this significant? Well, if we think about time like a string of dominoes, okay? So imagine that we have a whole row of dominoes, and we've got today marked off, okay? This is the ending domino where we're at. So how dominoes work, you line them all up, and then you knock them down, they go tick, 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 knock them all down until they hit the last one. So just imagine that the very last domino is today. So before today's domino can fall, well, yesterday had to happen. And knock down today's domino. Before yesterday could have occurred, well, there was a day before that. There must have been a day before that, and a day before that, and a day before that, and so on. Again, think about this as an entire string of dominoes. The only way to knock over today's domino is to either knock it over yourself or to be knocked down by all the dominoes before it. So now, if I want to somehow knock over today's domino, I'm going to have to go all the way to the beginning of that string of dominoes and knock over the first one. The problem is that if the universe is past infinite, if it's been around forever, there's no first domino for me to knock over. I could always go back another day, another day, another day, another day. If the universe has been here forever, we would never actually get to today. Or, like I said before, today would have happened an infinite amount of time ago. Because infinity is weird. Okay? But just thinking about an infinite regress, you can't go back forever. It is impossible. We just know intuitively there had to have been a first day. There had to be a first cause. So this is what's known as the impossibility of an infinite regress. Okay? You cannot go back forever. It is impossible to have an infinite regress, an infinite amount of things, okay? So we've got now our scientific evidence to believe that the universe came into existence. And we have our logical evidence. So the Big Bang cosmology, second law of thermodynamics, and then the impossibility of an infinite regress. There had to have been a first day. There had to have been some first day to get it all going, okay? The dominoes of time going. So I think it's safe to say that it's more reasonable to think that the universe began to exist than to believe the opposite, that it did not begin to exist, that it has always in fact been here. So now, as long as our statements are more reasonably true than false, then our conclusion necessarily follows. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Any questions? All right, but now, remember how I mentioned earlier, this syllogism doesn't have God in it. That's the whole point. Okay, we want some reason to think that God does in fact exist. Okay? Well, the best explanation for this is in fact God. We should believe that this cause is God. See, let's think about this. I mean, what must be able to cause an entire universe to come into existence? So let's think about what it would be like, okay? Well, it would have to be very powerful to create a universe out of nothing. Have to be pretty smart to not only create it, but to keep it going, okay? It would have to be timeless, meaning that it was outside of time. Because after all, if this thing, whatever it is, created time, it would have to be outside of time. If it created all matter, all things physical, it would have to be immaterial, non-physical, okay, not made of anything. So now you have to stop and think, all right, well, what can be timeless and immaterial? What kind of things can these be? What kind of non-physical things are there? I mean, you know, like numbers and shapes, something like that. Those are abstract objects. But what else is there? It could be simply a mind, a spirit, a non-physical being, a mind or a spirit. Basically, all of this adds up to what I would call God. So from this simple syllogism, by looking at the universe and understanding that it did not come into existence from nothing, we have good reason to believe that it has not been around forever. What could have caused it? What could have possibly brought the universe into existence? The best explanation is, in fact, God. But now, of course, then, the common objection is, all right, theist, well then, who created God? What caused God? If everything that exists needs a cause, well, what caused God? What do you guys think about that? Are we stuck? How do we wiggle out of this? If everything that exists needs a cause, what about God? How do we wiggle out of this?
This is the class participation.
That's it. Everybody's going to be leaving an atheist now if we don't get past this.
He just is.
What's the first sentence in the syllogism? What's the first premises?
Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. I heard a great story from Greg Koukl. He's one of my favorite apologists. So he was having a debate with an atheist. And, you know, this atheist threw that out at him. Well, who caused God? And Greg was like, you know, I find it really funny that you should ask me that. You're an atheist, okay? You don't believe in God. Therefore, God is uncreated and uncaused. I'm a Christian. I believe that God is eternal. He is uncaused and uncreated. Both of us here believe that God is uncaused and uncreated. So what was the point of your question? So here it is. Even God still passes the syllogism. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Okay, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Okay, we intuitively know that things that begin to exist need causes. Christians believe that God is eternal. He's always been here. Okay. So that is our first argument, the Kalam cosmological argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Step 2, the universe began to exist. 3, therefore, the universe has a cause. Super simple, no fancy words, no fancy vocabulary, okay? Might need to remember a few things like, Big Bang, second law of thermodynamics, but it's supported. It's supported by just basic human reasoning. It's supported by science. And I mean, this isn't like controversial science, like some weird Christian just like, oh yeah, I'm going to come up with some theory. No, like established science. Science that's been established for decades. So now we're going to move from the cosmos, like I said earlier, okay? We're going to go from the entire cosmos, and now we're going to zoom into the human heart and talk about the moral argument, which this might be even more stirring and even more down to home to someone that you're speaking with. Because it's something that we all come to face with all the time. Dealing with morality. How ought we to live? So, again, we're going to look at a syllogism, a logical argument. Again, just to keep things simple, but to keep it logical, to keep it focused, okay? And it's very simple. So it's like this. If God does not exist, objective morality does not exist. Step 2, objective morality exists. Step 3, therefore, God exists. Again, very simple. Okay, it's very simple. But of course, we need to unpack some things, because they might have some terminology here in this one that we may not quite understand. So for the first statement, if God does not exist, objective morality does not exist. So the question we need to ask then, what is objective morality? We all get this kind of idea of what morality is, but what does it mean for morality to be objective? Anybody have any ideas? What does it mean to be objective? If you ever heard the word, what does it mean to be objective? If somebody's giving you their objective opinion, or I shouldn't have said objective opinion, that was bad. Their objective view.
Perspective.
Excuse me?
Objection is like objective would be like a point, some kind of object.
Right, so what makes it objective though? Like if you're having a dispute with somebody else, and you say you want to bring in an objective third party, what does that generally mean?
Another point of view.
Okay, another point of view. But what should this person be? If two people are arguing, unbiased. Okay, unbiased. So basically, they're not going to have an opinion on the matter. Okay? They should be unbiased, so they're only going to look at the facts. Okay? They need to be dispassionate. They can't have any stake in the game, so they're just going to be unbiased. That's the way that we typically think of somebody being objective. Okay? So it's a good starting point. So basically, for something to be objective, it's not tarnished by someone else's opinions. It's not based on opinion. So objective is to be contrasted with subjective. So for something to be subjective means it's dependent on someone's opinions. For something to be objective, an objective viewpoint, means it's independent of people's opinions. Okay? So this is why when someone says, all right, well, I need an objective viewpoint here. You want someone that's not going to have kind of any stake in the game, that they're going to give you an outside opinion about something. But again, I just use the word again, opinion, that's still not completely clear. For something to be objective, it's independent of people's opinions. Okay? Based on facts, right? Recently, I saw my son had brought home some kind of like little worksheet, threw it out, forgot to save it. Oh well, they get so many papers, you're not going to keep them all. But it was basically, like fact versus opinion, and that's a good distinction between subjective and objective. So, in other words, a subjective statement would be like, I like chocolate ice cream. An objective statement would be like grass is green. Okay? So, some people might like chocolate, some people might not. Okay? But when I say I like chocolate, I'm telling you something about me. I'm not saying anything about chocolate. I'm telling you something about myself. I like it. Now, even if someone else were to say, chocolate ice cream is gross, it may sound as if they're making a statement about chocolate ice cream, but they're really making a statement about their tastes. They think it tastes gross. But if I were to say grass is green, that is an objective statement. Okay? It's not based on anybody's opinion. The truth of the statement grass is green is just based on the fact that grass is green. Okay? That's it.
My lawn
Or eyes.
Okay, but all right, if we said the chairs are blue, okay? It's not based on my opinion. It's based on the fact that the chairs are actually blue. The chair has this property of being blue. Now that would be true if I closed my eyes, okay? It would be true if I were blind or even if I were colorblind, okay? Because it's a feature of the chair, okay? So that's the difference between being objective and subjective. Subjective means that it's just your preference, your belief. It exists in your head, your mind, your heart. Objective means it's a feature of reality. It's out there, okay? It's grounded in the object. So now we need to get to objective morality, okay? Objective morality, this is morality that does not depend on people's opinion. That's what we're saying if morality is objective. It doesn't depend on what anybody thinks. We're not going out and taking a poll and whatever people agree to, fine, that's what we're going to make laws about, okay? Certain things are right and wrong regardless of what anyone says or thinks. Okay, certain things are in fact right or wrong regardless of what anyone says or thinks. So this is what it means for morality to be objective, okay? It doesn't mean that people agree all the time. People disagree on a lot of things. But it simply means that morality is not dependent on any one person or any one group, that it is true and it is binding regardless of what anyone thinks. Even if people have gotten some things wrong throughout history, even if our society might have things wrong now, that the moral code is still true and binding. In other words, say that murder is wrong. That is an objective statement. It is wrong. It's not simply me saying I think murder is wrong. I'm saying that murder somehow has this property of wrongness about it. As if I'm breaking some kind of a code or some kind of a law or a rule. You know, saying that rape is wrong. Torturing people for fun is wrong. It's really wrong. It's a feature of reality. It's not just my opinion. So that's what it means when we say that morality is objective. It's a feature of reality. But now, we need to make sense of this then. So if I'm saying that, you know, like these moral rules are a feature of reality, how do I make sense of that? Because I see that this chair is blue. It's right here, but I could also see somehow that murder is wrong. I've got some kind of sense about me that tells me that murder is wrong. The same way that I could look at this chair and know that it's blue, I also know that murder is wrong. So,
The chair being blue is something that society decided that's what that color is. Right?
well, but regardless regardless of what the name is, this color would still have, even if I say it in another language, the color is still the color, regardless of the name we give to it. So, like, you know,
Understand, like, we as a society, we gave that particular color, we gave it that name, blue.
Yeah, but it still makes it blue.
right, so we gave it that name, but if I said it in a different language, or if I decide,
If you were
yeah,
to say, I can sit on that, that's a true fact, we can sit on it.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? But you could say it's blue, and somebody would say, well, no, I know that it's green, or, I mean, I'm not trying to be offensive.
yeah.
I'm saying,
I mean, but we could say,
things that society decided. That's what I'm
well, but they might have decided on the name.
Right.
But if you measure the wavelength of the light bouncing off of it, like there's no deciding on that. It's going to have whatever wavelength it has.
Whoever
You know.
originally named blue,
Yeah,
still that is blue.
yeah. Like when Adam named a cow, you know, he just gave it a name. he just named it. Right. But we need to make sense of this, though. Like, how do we make sense of morality? See, morality, it's like rules or laws, things that can be broken or things that ought to be followed. But what are these rules? Where do they come from? Like, they're not a part of us. Otherwise, it would be subjective. If it's simply up to us in our opinion, that's subjective morality. But if there are these features of reality that it's not physical, right? It's not these laws that we need to have written down. We just kind of know it. We need to make sense of it, okay? So how do we make sense of objective morality? Well, we know that in common everyday life, laws require lawmakers, right? Just our regular laws, of everyday laws that we're following, okay? For our town, for our state, for our country. There are laws that are created by lawmakers, by officials. So it simply makes sense that an objective moral law that transcends all human being, all thought, would require some kind of objective moral lawmaker again, we would call this person God. Okay? If there is this universal moral law that binds everyone, once again, I'm not saying that we've gotten it right all throughout history, or that we could always see it clearly, because as Christians, we believe that we're fallen. So we're going to make some mistakes along the way. Society's going to have its own ideas, but the fact that, well, I'll get to that in a minute, but just the fact that there are these moral laws, if they do in fact exist, I should say, the best explanation for it then would be God. But of course, all right, you came to a quick conclusion. You're just saying that it's God. Well, why should I think it's God? Maybe there's something else. So we need to talk about that next, okay? If this objective moral law that binds us, that we know and recognize, okay? Let's suppose that it's not grounded in God. It doesn't come from God. What are some other options that we have to have an objective moral law? What are other options you could think of, or maybe some other people have put forth? Any other ideas of where morality came from? If not from God.
But you could be taught it, morality, but
Like when you tell a child that's wrong.
in me, I think morality comes together with a feeling. I think it's inside, like compassion and stuff like that. Where you wouldn't want to hurt another individual, not because somebody told you it's wrong, because you just, it's how it's going to make you feel. There might be somebody who's a murderer who felt happy about killing somebody, but that's the feeling that
They don't have that moral
Right, they
compass.
don't have a moral compass that, I think morality is in you from God.
Well, if you think about it, it went as far back as the first murder of Cain and Abel, and when he was hiding from God, he knew he did something wrong. How did he know he did something wrong? There's nobody there yet to tell him it was wrong, but yet he knew it was wrong, and he tried to hide. Am I my brother's keeper? I don't know. He tried lying about it.
Well, if we,
Something in him told him it was wrong.
well, if someone did believe that morality were subjective, then yes, someone could argue, hey man, for you, you feel compassion, you think murder is wrong, but like I don't have any feelings. I don't have any moral feelings. I killed and it doesn't matter, right? So then that would be an example of subjective morality where, hey man, you think murder is bad, I'm okay with it.
Right.
That would be an example of subjective morality. So what I'm saying is morality needs some kind of a foundation. It needs a grounding. It needs a source. So if it really does exist, somehow, this moral law that all human beings just kind of intuitively know, where else could that come from? What else could be the grounding of it or the source of it? Any
I've
other
heard
ideas?
some people say, it's kind of like the law of gravity. So it's just kind of in the universe.
So it just exists.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's like a brute fact of the universe. Sure, that's one. Evolution. Okay. What else? Any other ideas?
The law? What about the law?
Like whatever the government says?
Yeah.
Thanks for helping me out, guys. So here's four. Okay, so I'm gonna lay out four. Okay, so four other ideas that people have advanced that could be the source of morality. Okay, so people say evolution. We simply evolved to have this sense of morality, this common sense of morality. We evolved it. There could be a social contract. Okay, or objective morality is based in human flourishing. Whatever allows humans to flourish best, that's objectively what's right or wrong. And wrong is whatever causes us to then suffer or feel pain. Or, like JD was saying, it just exists. It's simply a brute fact of the universe. Okay? So let's look at these one at a time. Okay? So let's look at evolutionary morality. Okay? So how does morality work? What's the gist of evolution? Why did we evolve the way that we did? What's the point of evolution? So some of these common phrases that we hear regarding evolution.
Natural selection.
Natural selection. Okay, so what does that mean, natural selection? The strong, right, the strong survive. Right? Okay, the strong survive. So we've adapted this way because it allows us to survive. Right? So basically, what would morality be then? within evolution? What does morality, a sense of morality, enable us to do? Survive. Wouldn't it simply be a survival mechanism?
Yeah, because we couldn't live amongst each other if we didn't have morality.
So it would simply be then just a survival mechanism. It would just be an instinct. It would just be this belief that we have. But the argument about objective morality, that it's not merely a part of us. It's something outside of us. There's this moral code that kind of hangs over us and that we are beholden to. Okay? Evolution may be able to describe why I think murder is wrong, but it can't give me any kind of foundation to why murder is actually wrong. Evolution could explain my feelings of why I think it's wrong. Okay? It could explain my instincts, but it can't explain why murder is wrong, why there is this moral law. Murder is wrong. All evolution gives us is instincts. And even at that, I have no obligation to my instincts. There's no moral obligation to it. I could live however I want now. I could simply say, I am more evolved than the rest of you, and I can just do whatever I want. Think about, pick your movie, I could be Thanos, and that's it. If I think that I'm more highly evolved than you, what does it matter? So evolution can give us beliefs. It can give us instincts, but evolution cannot really ground morality, and a morality that's outside of us. Evolution is purely inside of us. All it could do is explain what's in us, if it's even a fact. So now let's look at social contract theory. Can anybody tell me what this is? Social contract theory.
How we agree to live with each other.
Okay, good. So basically, it could be formal, something written, or it could just be informal. How people just decide to get along. It might, might not even be spoken or verbal, just what people happen to do. So some people say that objective morality is grounded in social contract theory. It's simply how we get along. All right, so what's the problem with this then?
I've never been invited to the meeting that they decided.
Yeah, right, yeah. And once again, the way that he put it, it was invited to me where people decided that. Is that objective? No, it's just society agreeing. It's not society recognizing what's right and wrong. This is based on simply on people agreeing, look, this is how we're going to get along. Now, what if people decided that, to get along better, they're going to take anybody with a bad attitude and throw them in a volcano or run them over with a car? And that's just how we achieve peace. Okay?
People wouldn't exist.
Yeah, but, we can...
Right now, there's somebody who thinks what's right and what's wrong right now.
If it's just based on social contract, then it could just be whatever keeps the peace. It could change from time to time. It could change based on whatever the current society is, the needs, whoever's most powerful, yeah. Yeah, so, there's nothing objective about it. It's just whatever allows people to get along. What if I'm getting along just fine and everybody else around me is suffering? If there's no objective law outside of me, I have no reason to care. Which kind of leads into the next one, which is human flourishing, okay? The idea that, whatever promotes human flourishing, that is objective. We can know based on science, don't run into traffic. That's objectively stupid because you're probably going to get killed, okay? We know through science that if you diet and exercise, you're going to have a healthier life. You're going to live longer. You see, science can tell us objectively what's right and what's wrong. Okay? What's wrong with this then?
Which humans? Which humans?
Just humanity in general. What's wrong with saying that human flourishing is the objective good? Yeah, I just spoil it. It is. If somebody's saying, well, human flourishing is good, you're simply defining it that way. Human flourishing is the greatest good, and good is whatever promotes human flourishing. It's like, you see that? It's simply because you're just simply saying that that's what it is. Why humans? Kind of like what he's getting to. Okay? Well, like, why humans? Why not dolphin flourishing? There are plenty of environmentalists, like some of them, I don't mean all of them, but there are some of them that think that humanity is just a blight on the planet. We need to be killed off because the planet's more vulnerable. The universe is, well, not vulnerable, most valuable. That the earth is more valuable than the humans living on it. There's some people who value the earth more. Okay? It's why humans? That's really speciesism, really. You know, why think that human beings are special? That we ought to survive, or that whatever allows us to live is what's best. Okay? So again, that's just a matter of opinion.
Yeah, usually when somebody brings this up, I say, so you're pro-life, huh? And all of a sudden, not really. Like, what is it? You just said human flourishing is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Or should we,
They would probably wriggle out of it by saying things like, well, the baby would probably have a hard life, or it would allow the mother to flourish better. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
this human, the flourishing of this human
Yeah.
trumps the
Yeah.
flourishing of that human.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I said, which human? Right.
Yeah. 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 And again, like, what obligation do I have to my fellow humans? If I'm living a good life and I'm cheating people, I'm taking advantage of people, and I'm living a good life, what does it matter to me? If there's nothing outside of me, if there's nothing judging me, nothing that I'm obliged to follow, what does it matter to me? If I'm rich, I'm powerful, who cares who I step on? A lot of these other options, they could just be taken down with the very simple question, so what? Why should I care? Why? What does it matter?
And a lot of the arguments that a lot of atheists and non-believers present, like these,
Yeah.
is basically because the focus is it's their choices, their decisions. They don't have to answer to anyone else other than themselves. At the end of the day, that's
Yeah.
where their arguments come from.
Yeah, a lot of it is a heart issue
Yeah.
that then transfers into be an intellectual issue. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of the case. That sometimes, we say it a lot, that sometimes the issue isn't the issue. Sometimes the objection they raise isn't really the objection that they have. It's just a defense mechanism. So the last one now is the brute fact. Morality is just a brute fact of the universe, fancily called atheistic moral Platonism. So what this means is that basically truth and like honesty and justice, compassion, these are simply facts of the universe. They're like out there somewhere, okay? They're just facts of the universe. They simply exist. Okay? What's the problem with that?
Because of a newborn baby, when it comes into the world, you don't have to teach that baby how to be bad, you already know how to be bad.
Yeah, there's original sin. But right, so what's the problem though with this notion that like honesty, justice, love, mercy, that they are just these virtues that are out there that we just need to follow, that it's just like there's a law of gravity, there's a law of, don't kill. What's the problem with that? What are the problems of this? Because remember, this is atheistic moral Platonism.
They have no ground, no wonder they decide.
Yeah, I mean, it's just out there. First of all, why should I think that? Like, it's just weird. Like, if we're looking at the Kalam cosmological argument. So you're telling me that when the Big Bang happened and this entire universe came into existence, somehow these immaterial things such as like honesty and justice popped into existence too? Like that was part of the Big Bang? And that, by some chance of luck, through the process of evolution, we've evolved some kind of a sense to know that it's out there? It's a bit of a stretch. And in a sense, it's kind of incoherent. Like, how do they exist? They're out there somewhere? Like, and also, what obligation do I have? Obligation is a big thing. What duty do I have? What obligation do I have to these abstract objects just floating out there? Like, I have no obligations to the number 7 or to isosceles triangles or whatever. So then why should I be obligated to follow honesty or compassion? We know that there must be some kind of a law, but laws also require authorities to enforce them. Or that, like, honesty is something that's between persons. Loyalty exists between persons. Compassion is exercised to another person. It's not just something abstract. It requires persons. That's why the best explanation is going to be God. Because these virtues, they need to be grounded somewhere, in something, in a person. And this person is going to be God. So we have statement one. If God does not exist, objective morality does not exist. God is simply the best explanation for it. If there is no God, then there couldn't possibly be any grounding for objective morality either. Any thoughts or questions before we move on to number two? All right, so then of course, statement number two is that objective morality exists. It's a bold assertion, right? We're simply saying objective morality exists. So why do we think this? What do we think about this? Do we think that morality is in fact objective? Or do we think that it's subjective? What are our thoughts? Anybody?
So how many people think that it's objective? Raise your hand for us. Okay. So most people raise their hand. Anybody think it's subjective? Anybody arms don't work?
But why? The question is why. Okay? Why should I believe this? Why should I think that morality is in fact objective and it's not just simply a matter of personal preference? Why should I think this? For those of you who did think that it is objective, why?
I think it's objectively right because it's a relationship you have with God. It's morally correct because of how you flow with that. You don't flow just to exist
Right.
because there's a lot of things that just exist that don't flow right. So the difference is you're flowing now with God, the Spirit, right? Jesus, the Holy Spirit is a Trinity place for that relationship to coexist. This other stuff is almost like just like put together in an abstract way, like the law of physics. It's
Right.
kind of morally challenges.
Right. So the question is then, why should we think that objective morality exists? So if we're speaking to somebody who's a non-believer, why should they think that that's true? Because we need them to think that, we need them to believe that it's more reasonably true than false. So if you're talking with somebody else, how would you, let's say, convince them or show them that morality isn't something that you simply make up, but that it's something that it's true and binding on everyone?
Well, if it's subjective, I'll take the other side. I don't think it's bad to murder somebody, and you do. I'll show you, I'll kill you. Obviously, if somebody can hurt you, you might say, wait a minute, maybe it's not so subjective.
So basically, yeah, if somebody
Yeah,
says
you know,
stealing is
wait a
wrong,
minute.
you steal their car.
Yeah, if we all
Hey,
went
that was
around going,
wrong.
hey, well,
Yeah.
my thought is
Yeah.
I could do that,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I'm on the other side going, wait a minute.
Yes.
Somebody has to be able to tell that person,
Yeah.
no, that's wrong. You could take my life or his life, or you know, or you can harm that person by raping them or whatever.
Yeah.
So to coexist, we have to have them believe that it's an objective thing because it affects another person.
So the best way to do this is simply through examples. You know, okay, the statement murder is wrong. Do you think that's something that we can disagree on? Or do you think that's something that's a true fact of reality? Do you think it's okay to rape?
Right.
Do you think that is simply a matter of opinion that some people think is cool? Or do you think that this is something that's wrong for everyone?
Right.
See, morality is something that we intuitively know. It's something that we see. We just know that it's wrong. Look throughout history. I mean, we've got the Holocaust. We've got the slave trade. These are things that we just know intuitively. These things are evil. Even if the Nazis won World War II and they took over the world, and they brainwashed everybody to believe that, what we did was great. Even if they weren't able to bring about their own version of world peace, it would still be evil. Because treating people like that is evil. Okay, the slave trade. Oh my goodness, like, think about 2020. I mean, how crazy has our society been? Why? Because there are these issues that our society is struggling with. People are convinced, like, no, this is wrong. This is something that must be addressed. Now imagine going up to somebody and being like, nah, man, I think, racism could be cool for some people. What do you think's gonna happen? You're gonna get punched. Just think about how tumultuous our society was, all right? Everybody believed, we may disagree on what's right and wrong, but everybody believes within their hearts, no, this is right, no, this is right. We can't disagree on this, okay? You are wrong. Because we know deep down, morality is not just something that we make up. It's something that we know deep down is right, not just for me, but for everyone across all time.
Well, like the issue of slavery, for instance, that was a moral issue that came into play because a lot of farmers and plantation owners flourished with free labor, but there was some that still knew that it wasn't right. So that was their morality that kicked in that made them fight that. Abraham Lincoln, for instance, and saying that this is just not right. Even like they gave up something. What I'm saying is they gave up free labor, but because they knew something wasn't right, just wasn't right what
We
they were
don't have
doing
the
to
right
another
to
human.
make another human.
They could have just looked the other way, but it was their morality that said we need to change this.
Well, who's to say what humans more or less that they should
I
be
mean,
enslaved?
slavery wasn't only in America. I mean, it was Egypt.
yeah.
It was all over the all over the world in different eras.
Oh, yeah, Hebrews
But
also.
that it took their morality to stand up and say what's happening to certain humans is just not right, and that was their morality that really decided to fight that war against slavery.
Well, even back in Moses' time, he freed the Hebrews and took them out of Egypt.
Yep.
They were enslaved. And somebody had to say, hey, this is wrong.
Yeah, because remember, the main principle here is, all right, well, is it more true than the opposite? If objective morality is not the case of morality, then it must be subjective. But do you really think it's the case that, hey man, slavery is wrong for me, but it's okay for you? Genocide, you might think it's wrong,
Right.
but I think it's cool. Like, if you ever met somebody like that, you would know that you're eating a nut job.
Correct.
And that's the truth of it.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have a conversation with someone, you'd be like, so you honestly think that, like rape is just a matter of opinion? That's not really, really wrong. And if someone's gonna deny that, then you know that they're either A, lying because they don't like the conclusion, or they have a broken moral compass.
Right.
And that's it. It's just something that we intuitively know. As Christians, we understand that God implanted it on our hearts, okay? But morality is one of those things that we simply know. We intuitively know. We see people hurting. Now, we know that as Christians, that because of sin, we might not always see things well. We might not always get every situation correct. But it doesn't mean that there is not an objective moral standard. Just the same way that you're like, I got really bad vision. If you take out my contacts, I can't see anything. I wouldn't be able to see anybody. But you'd still be there. The chair would still be blue,
Right.
even if I took out my contact lenses. So that's the same thing what sin has done to us. Okay, well, we're still going to agree about some things, not sort of to disagree about something, but it doesn't mean that there is not an objective moral standard. So the best way to show that objective morality does in fact exist is just give some examples. Talk to the other person. See where they're at. Look at their Facebook feed. Okay.
Yeah.
Look at their Twitter. Okay. What are the things that they're promoting? Okay. So you believe equality is important. Is that just your personal opinion, or do you think that everybody should believe that equality is important? Do you think that homophobia is wrong just for you personally, or do you think that it's wrong for all of our society? Whatever the hot button issue is. Do you think it's wrong to pollute? Okay, do you think it's simply wrong for some people? Or do you think it's wrong for everyone? Everybody has a hot button issue. Whether you agree with it or not, you can still, say fine. In your system, okay, in your worldview, you think that this is really wrong. How do you make sense of things being really wrong? Okay? If it is true that objective morality does in fact exist, the best explanation for that morality is then God. If there truly is this objective moral code, this objective moral law that's valid and binding on every human being, even if people deny it, even if people just don't get it or don't see it, if it is still there, God is still the best explanation for it. This argument is so powerful, like I said, in 2020 was just crazy. And there's been so many different causes, different activist groups. And you could really get to someone through that. Hey, look, man, you really committed to this group. Tell me, is it just, you personally, that you personally feel drawn to this issue? Or do you really believe down in your heart that this is right, that your issue is right, or whatever you're standing against is morally wrong? Okay, how do you make sense of it? It's a powerful argument for the existence of God. Okay, because everybody knows deep down there are things wrong in this country. There are things that are wrong in this world. We might not all agree, we might not all get it right, but if you've got that sense, you need to explain why. The best explanation for objective morality is God.
One thing that I've noticed when I see a lot of conversations and arguments that go on online, like whether it's Facebook or whatever, is that a lot of people create, it's almost like their own cult or their own religion, because it's more subjective morality, what they feel is right or wrong, but it's completely outside of Scripture, it's outside of God's words, outside of God altogether. But it's their own creation, so it's almost like their own religion, their own cult. Because it's like they have guidelines, they have rules, they have certain things that you must fall into this, you must follow this. I say this is right, this is society right, I'm a social justice warrior, all this other nonsense. But it's just, again, they've created their own religion, their own cult to make themselves feel good, because they don't have to answer to an objective God and his objective law, which is the Scriptures, the Word of God.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of that online. It's kind of hard to reach people when they've created literally their own religion within themselves that's completely subjective.
Yeah, but when people feel that strongly about things, an argument like that is perfect for that kind of. The person who's wishy-washy, he doesn't really believe in anything, he doesn't have any strong stances on anything, they might be like, yeah, whatever, some people feel about this. But if someone has really strong feelings about something, that's the person who's primed to be like, hey, so why do you feel this way? Why do you believe that this issue is so important? Do you think that it's something that should be important for everyone? Do you think that it's just your personal thing? Find points of connection. Hey man, I think equality is very important too, because I think that everyone's created in the image of God. Why do you think equality is so important? It's a great launching point whenever people do have these strong feelings. It might be hard to get through to, and it might take a lot of trying, but if people really are that passionate, they believe number two, intuitively, they believe it, but then you need to show them that the best explanation for objective morality is God, and then you need to show them God's moral code. That's when it comes into showing what God does teach and what the Bible says. All right, so the initial question was, why believe God exists? So tonight we looked at two strong arguments, very powerful arguments, that God does in fact exist. So we looked at the Kalam cosmological argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause for its existence. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Okay? What can this cause be? Gotta be pretty strong, gotta be pretty smart, it's gotta be outside of time. It can't be made of any stuff, because this created all of that stuff. What could that thing be? It's not going to be an abstract object like the number 7 or an isosceles triangle. All right, mathematical objects, they can't create anything but headaches. Okay, my students teach me all the time. So it's got to be a person, something willful with an intention to create. And then we have the moral argument. Something that shows us that our basic moral intuitions, they tell us that there's something wrong with this world. That's a clue to that there is God, that there is a moral standard out there that we are all beholden to. But of course, this just gets us to a God. This just gets us to a general creator God. Okay? This doesn't quite get us to Christianity, which is the point. Okay, if we can't get to Christianity, then we haven't finished our job. So that's what next month is all about. So our next question is, did Jesus really rise from the dead? This is the core of Christianity. Okay? Our own Bible says it in 1 Corinthians 15. If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, Paul said this, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, our faith is futile. It's pointless. And we're just pathetic. We're of all people to be pitied if Jesus didn't really rise from the dead. This is the most important event in history.
That's right.
So we need to know, did this really happen? So, if there was ever a month for you to invite a friend, to invite your pastor, next week is going to be it. Why do you believe what you believe? Why are you a Christian? It all hinges on the resurrection.